I was sipping my morning coffee, standing barefoot on the creaky wooden dock my dad built with his own two hands when I saw the envelope flapping in the breeze, pinned to the front of my boat with neon green tape. I knew before I even touched it, it was going to ruin my day. Immediate action required, HOA violation notice. That was printed in bold, red letters across the top. My eyes narrowed. I hadn't even unpacked my boxes yet. I'd only been living at Wren Harbor for 3 weeks. Apparently, that was more than enough time for the Maple Bay Shores Homeowners Association to come knocking, or taping. I ripped the notice off and read the first few lines out loud in disbelief. Your watercraft is in direct violation of Section 14.3a of the Maple Bay HOA Guidelines, unregistered, aesthetically disruptive, and moored in community waters without authorization. I chuckled out loud. Community waters? That phrase echoed in my mind like an unwanted guest. Because here's the part they didn't know, this wasn't community water. It was mine. And I had the deeds to prove it. My name's Ben Carver, and up until last month, I was the senior director of engineering at a Fortune 100 logistics firm in Atlanta. I had the kind of job most people dream about: 6 figures, a corner office, business class flights, and stock options. But I also had something else, an exhaustion so deep it felt like a disease. So when I got the call that my Uncle Paul had passed and left me the Carver Basin property, I took it as a sign. The Carver Basin wasn't just any lake, it was a 40-acre private freshwater pocket nestled between pine-covered hills in upstate North Carolina, with a fishing dock, a century-old boathouse, and a run-down log cabin that needed love but had character. My great-grandfather, an ornery Civil War veteran turned carpenter, had bought it in 1918 for a few $100 and passed it down through generations. For decades, our family barely touched it, too busy with city life. But when I stepped out of my car and heard the wind rustling through the trees, smelled that pine-laced air, and saw the mist lifting off the water at sunrise, I knew I wasn't going back. So I cashed out. Left the firm. Packed up my dog Duke, my tools, my guitar, and one photo of my parents, and moved in. The boat in question was my uncle's, a 1979 Crestliner aluminum beauty with cracked vinyl seats and more character than the HOA's entire board. I'd spent the last week patching her up, adding a new trolling motor, and giving her the respect she deserved. And now, apparently, the HOA didn't like the color scheme. Aesthetically disruptive, they said. To them, anything older than 5 years and not painted beige was an eyesore. I crumpled the notice in my fist and looked across the lake, where I saw a half-dozen shiny fiberglass boats docked at the fancier homes on the east bank. A few had HOA tags stuck to their outboards. One even had a flag with the Baywater Fishing Club emblem, a heron holding a trout in its beak. That's when it hit me, they thought they owned the water. They didn't. See, when my uncle passed, I'd had the property professionally surveyed. The Carver Basin parcel included not just the cabin and the surrounding 10 acres, but the entire lake itself, up to 30 feet beyond the shoreline in all directions. In other words, anyone fishing in the lake, docking on it, or even dipping a kayak in the water from one of the new development homes across the way was technically on my property. And that included the Maple Bay HOA and their self-declared fishing club. But instead of confronting them directly, I decided to play it smart, quietly, and legally. I called Rachel Mendoza, an old college friend and environmental attorney now working for a property rights nonprofit in Asheville. "You're telling me they issued a violation notice for a boat on your own lake?" she asked, already sounding annoyed on my behalf. "They even threatened to tow it." She laughed. "That's rich. Do me a favor, don't throw anything away. Take photos of the letter, the notice, and anything else they stick on your property. Oh, and Ben? Install cameras. This might get ugly." The next morning, I installed 2 motion-activated trail cameras, one by the dock and another by the path leading down from the gravel road. I also dug through the old filing cabinet in the boathouse, and sure enough, the original deed to Carver Basin was right there, with my great-grandfather's name in ornate cursive and a legal description that clearly established full ownership of the lake bed and water rights. It was airtight. Later that week, a neighbor named Lenny Carter dropped by. Lenny was in his 60s, wore overalls like armor, and introduced himself by saying, "If they come for your shed next, shoot twice and ask questions later." He handed me a 6-pack of craft beer and shook my hand like he meant it. "They've been pulling this crap ever since they finished the last round of development over on Birch Point," Lenny said, spitting on the gravel like punctuation. "They built them fancy homes, formed an HOA, and now they think they own the valley. Next thing you know, they'll say you can't hang laundry outside." I asked him about the Baywater Fishing Club. Lenny rolled his eyes. "Them? They think they're base masters. Every summer they throw these tournaments, host barbecues, set up tents, hell, they even put porta potties by the lake last year. You best believe they didn't ask your uncle's permission." But he wasn't the confronting type. I was. 3 days later, I got another letter, this time from the Baywater HOA legal office, complete with an embossed logo and a signature from someone named Veronica Hale, HOA president. The letter restated their claim that my boat was in violation and that continued disregard of community standards would result in escalating fines and potential legal action. It ended with, "As a member of the Maple Bay Shores community, you are expected to abide by collective property usage standards." Now that was interesting. Because according to county tax records, I wasn't a member of their community at all. My land was never part of Maple Bay Shores. It had never been annexed. My great-grandfather had refused to sell when the developers came knocking in the 1980s, and as a result, Carver Basin remained legally separate. So this was no misunderstanding. This was a hostile takeover attempt. I emailed the scanned letters and deed to Rachel. She called me 2 hours later, voice crisp with professional fire. "They've overstepped in a major way," she said. "This isn't just civil overreach. Depending on what they try next, it could rise to criminal trespass and fraud. Do not engage directly with them. We're going to play this smart." She paused. "Also, I found something. There's a listing in the county zoning board from last month. The HOA filed a preliminary interest request for something called Maple Bay Marina and Lodge, scheduled to be proposed this quarter. And guess what lake is in the center of the proposed development?" My stomach turned. "They're planning a resort on my lake?" Exactly. And they were probably banking on nobody reading the fine print until it was too late. That night, I sat on the dock with Duke lying beside me, the lake glassy and still. Somewhere across the water, I saw lights glowing from one of the big houses, and I imagined the HOA board sipping wine, congratulating themselves on finally reclaiming the lake they'd never legally owned. I didn't sleep much. But the next morning, I had a new plan. A plan they wouldn't see coming. The sun crept up over the pine trees, casting golden streaks across Carver Basin as I sat at the edge of the dock, coffee in hand, watching the mist lift like a curtain revealing the main stage. But this wasn't peace. It was the eye of a storm. Because what the HOA didn't know was that I wasn't just a retired engineer with a lake house and a stubborn streak. I was an engineer who spent 18 years in data systems and cybersecurity, who knew how to plan, document, and, most importantly, stay 10 steps ahead. And I was about to give them a masterclass. By noon, Rachel had driven in from Asheville with her overstuffed briefcase, laptop, and a mind wired for war. We cleared off the kitchen table and spread out every document we had. The original deed from 1918. A modern survey with GPS coordinates confirming the boundary. Photos of the neon HOA violation notices. A printed copy of the HOA letter signed by Veronica Hale. Screenshots from the Baywater Fishing Club's website, which proudly featured the lake in its banners, "Come cast your line in scenic Carver Basin." We weren't just building a case. We were constructing a wall they wouldn't be able to climb, no matter how many fake bylaws or puffed-up emails they sent. "Ben," Rachel said, scanning a zoning map on her tablet, "there's something else here." She turned the screen toward me. "This proposed marina and lodge project? They're planning to build on your eastern shore, but they filed the proposal under Baywater East Shoreline as if it were community land." She flipped to another screen. They've already submitted environmental impact statements for water usage and shoreline development. So they're that confident they own it? I asked. No. Worse, she said, her eyes narrowing. They know they don't, but they're counting on you not knowing it either. That night, I launched a private drone flight over the eastern edge of the lake and took high-resolution video. Sure enough, there were flags staked in the ground, bright red and blue, markers used by developers to plan out boundaries for future construction. It was subtle. A few were tucked into bushes or between trees. But the message was clear: the HOA had already started preparing to break ground, without a single conversation, contract, or consent. Rachel stood beside me, arms crossed. They're not just bluffing anymore. They've made a move. Which means, now it's our turn. The next morning, I filed a quiet title action with Rachel's help, a legal proceeding used to confirm and formalize my undisputed ownership of Carver Basin. This would serve two purposes. Block the HOA from attempting any historical or implied use claims on the lake. Put a legal landmine in front of their development efforts. Any zoning board reviewing the application would now be forced to halt or reconsider. But we didn't stop there. Rachel drafted a letter, firm, polite, and legally precise, and we delivered it by hand to the HOA's main office at the Maple Bay Shores Community Center. Veronica Hale wasn't expecting me. The office was sleek and sterile, with motivational posters on the wall and artificial plants trying to look real. Veronica was seated behind a frosted glass desk when I stepped in. She looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" "Yes, ma'am," I said calmly. "I'm Ben Carver. I received several violation notices about my boat on Carver Basin. I just wanted to hand-deliver my response." I placed the letter gently on her desk. She read the first line, and her posture changed instantly. "This letter serves as formal notification that Carver Basin is private property, wholly owned by Mr. Benjamin Carver. Any attempts to regulate, access, or develop this land or water body without written consent constitute trespassing and may result in legal action." Her lips tightened. "This isn't necessary, Mr. Carver." "Oh, but it is," I said with a smile. "Especially since your fishing club has used my lake for tournaments over the past 4 summers. She stood up, defensive. "We've had informal use agreements in place for years." "Name one." "In writing." "Signed by me or my uncle." She was silent. "I'll wait," I said. Then added, "Also, I'd advise pulling your marina proposal from the zoning board. I've already filed a quiet title action with the county. Should make for an awkward hearing if it goes forward." She stared at me, eyes narrowing. "You're not being very neighborly." I leaned forward just a little, calm as a still lake. "Neither are thieves." On the way out, I bumped into Gerald Franks, the self-proclaimed president of the Baywater Fishing Club. He was wearing a crisp white polo shirt, mirrored sunglasses, and a grin he probably practiced in the mirror. "Mr. Carver. Good to finally meet you," he said, offering his hand. I shook it, keeping my expression unreadable. "I understand you're our new neighbor," he continued. "We'd love to invite you to our annual spring tournament next Saturday. It's our biggest event, folks come from across the state. We'll have tents, music, the whole works." "Oh?" I said. "Where's it being held?" "Same place as always, east shore of the lake. You've probably seen our setup. Feel free to bring your boat and mingle with the locals. We love welcoming new blood." I smiled slowly. "You know what, Gerald? I'll be there." And I meant it. Just not for the barbecue. Back at the cabin, Rachel and I began setting up new surveillance equipment. We installed high-resolution cameras, placed signage that read private property, video surveillance in use, and added geotagged QR codes to each sign, linking to an online PDF of my ownership deed. We even ordered drones to run automated patrols during the tournament, programmed to hover silently and record from 300 feet. But the real genius move was Rachel's idea. She drafted a formal usage audit request addressed to the HOA board, demanding they provide documentation of any agreements, permits, or usage rights for Carver Basin going back 10 years. By law, as an adjacent landowner, I had the right to request that audit. They would now be legally required to dig into their own files and come up empty. It was like pulling the pin and tossing the grenade directly into their filing cabinet. The day before the fishing tournament, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Carver," the man said smoothly, "my name's Todd Knowles. I represent East Valley Holdings, one of the investment partners behind the Maple Bay Marina proposal. I was hoping to schedule a friendly conversation about the future of Carver Basin. Are you aware that Carver Basin is private property?" I asked. "I'm aware there's some ambiguity." "There's not. I own it. Always have. The paperwork's public record." A pause. Then he cleared his throat. "Well then, perhaps we could arrange an acquisition. East Valley is prepared to offer a generous sum for the lake and adjacent parcels." There it was. The real play. "How generous?" "We're talking 7 figures, he said, like he was dropping a gold bar at my feet. "Is that before or after I press charges for trespassing and illegal development filings?" Silence. "Then, Mr. Carver, there's no need for hostility. These are just business conversations." "Good. Then here's my counteroffer, stay the hell off my lake." And I hung up. That night, I stood on the dock again, the water still, the stars reflecting off its surface like diamonds. Duke curled beside me, ears twitching at the rustle of frogs nearby. Across the lake, I saw lanterns being set up, tents going up, and banners getting hung in the dark. The HOA was preparing for a party. But they had no idea what I had planned. The morning of the Baywater Fishing Club's spring tournament arrived with a picturesque sunrise so perfect it could have sold postcards. Birds chirped. The water gleamed. Laughter drifted from across the lake as trucks rolled in, hauling fancy boats and trailers adorned with bass decals and fishing slogans. But what none of them realized. They were walking straight into a legally documented ambush. I sat on my cabin porch with a fresh cup of coffee, Duke at my feet, and my binoculars in hand. Rachel stood beside me, scanning the east shoreline through her own lens. "Let the games begin," she murmured. At 7:12 a.m., the first wave of anglers arrived. Men in $400 polarized sunglasses stepped out of trucks, barking orders and snapping selfies with coffee cups and rods. A few had clipboards. One guy planted a Baywater tournament check-in sign in the dirt. Another began setting up a large inflatable archway that read, "Annual Baywater Anglers Open, sponsored by Maple Bay HOA." That's when Rachel hit record on the camera mounted to the porch rail. "They're branding it with the HOA name now," she said. "That's bold." "Oh, it gets better," I said. I pointed toward the center of the lake where a pontoon boat with giant speakers was being anchored. "PA system," I added. "So they can announce illegal fish sizes to trespassers in surround sound." We laughed. But under that laugh was steel. Because today wasn't about fishing. It was about gathering undeniable evidence, and setting the stage for a takedown they'd never forget. By 9 a.m., the shoreline looked like a small concert venue. Tents lined the bank. Coolers were stacked high with beer and soda. Tables full of catering trays sat steaming in the sun. A whiteboard displayed the tournament schedule. And worst of all, there were already over 40 people spread across my land, some sitting in fold-out chairs directly underneath my private property signs. I had placed them all yesterday. Bold letters. Bright red borders. Laminated and staked into the dirt every 30 feet. With QR codes linked to the deed. Not a single person scanned it. Instead, they hung banners over them, tied balloons to the stakes, and used one as a napkin holder. Rachel was documenting everything. We had footage from the ground, drone captures from above, and motion-triggered trail cams recording entrances and exits. At 11:08 a.m., Gerald Franks took the stage, or rather, the wooden dock they had built the year before, on my property, without ever asking. He tapped the mic. Welcome, anglers. Another beautiful day here on what we proudly call Baywater Lake. Rachel looked up from her notebook. They renamed the lake, she whispered. I didn't answer. I was too busy filming Gerald as he strutted like a prize rooster, boasting about the club's growing membership and our exciting partnership with the HOA. He ended the speech with, "Thanks to Veronica Hale and the entire Maple Bay HOA for making this possible, and to our investment friends from East Valley Holdings who are here to witness our amazing lake culture. Let's show them what this community is made of." The crowd cheered. I was already texting Rachel a timestamp. Just before noon, Veronica Hale arrived, wearing a sleeveless golf shirt and pearls, her HOA lanyard swaying as she greeted investors from East Valley Holdings. I counted 3 suits, 2 real estate agents, and 1 man in Gucci sunglasses pointing at a brochure with blueprints of the proposed marina. Rachel zoomed in with the telephoto lens. The brochure showed a glossy rendering of Baywater Marina and Lodge, complete with boat slips, rental cabins, a restaurant, and a private parking deck. I could feel the heat rise in my chest. That entire development was supposed to sit right here, on my land. And they were presenting it like it was already theirs. That was the last straw. Rachel stood up and calmly slid her phone into her back pocket. Time to drop the hammer. We grabbed the stack of folders we had prepared the night before, the injunction paperwork, the deed copies, time-stamped photos, and a court-ordered notice of trespass filed just that morning. We also had the county sheriff on speed dial. But we didn't need him yet. This next part? We were doing it ourselves. We arrived at the eastern shoreline by 12:30, walking side by side, both dressed in jeans and windbreakers, looking casual. But every step was calculated. I held a rolled-up copy of the property survey under one arm and a body cam strapped discreetly under my shirt. Rachel held the legal binder like it was a weapon. As we reached the main tent, a woman with a clipboard stepped in front of us. "Sorry, this is a private event." Rachel smiled warmly. "Oh, we know." She stepped around the woman and addressed the crowd with a clear voice. "Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Mendoza, legal counsel for Mr. Benjamin Carver, the legal owner of Carver Basin, including the land you're all standing on right now." Heads turned. Forks froze. Beer cans paused mid-sip. Effective immediately, Rachel continued, "You are all trespassing on private property, and this event is operating in violation of multiple local ordinances and state trespass laws." Veronica Hale stormed forward. "This is outrageous." "I agree," Rachel said. "Especially since you were personally served with a cease and desist 2 weeks ago. And yet here we are." Veronica's mouth opened, but Rachel wasn't done. She pulled a document from the binder and held it up high. "This is a certified deed to Carver Basin, signed, stamped, and upheld by a North Carolina property judge just yesterday in response to our quiet title filing. This land is not HOA property. It never was. And your development plans? Illegal." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Gerald Franks pushed his way toward us, red-faced and shaking. "You can't just show up here and shut us down." "I can," I said calmly. "Because this is my lake. And you're not invited." I handed him a copy of the deed. His eyes skimmed it, and the blood drained from his face. "This is a mistake." "No," I said. "The mistake was thinking you could throw tournaments, install docks, and invite investors to my property without asking." I turned to the investors. "Just so you're aware, East Valley Holdings may want to pause its project. Your potential resort? It's built on land you have 0 rights to. You've been lied to." That hit harder than anything else. One of the men in suits stepped forward. "Is this true?" he asked, looking at Veronica. She hesitated. "There have been complications." "Complications?" I said. "Let's talk about that dock, the tents, the porta potties, the website, and the 5 years of tournament revenue your club has earned from hosting events on my land." I looked at Rachel. "Shall we let them know about the lawsuit?" She nodded. We'll be filing a formal claim against the Maple Bay HOA, the Baywater Fishing Club, and any parties involved in profiting from unauthorized use of Mr. Carver's land. That includes any investor who continues forward despite receiving this notice." The investors didn't need to hear more. They turned and left the shoreline immediately, talking in hushed tones. The crowd began to disband. Some grumbled. Others apologized. Most were simply stunned. I took a slow breath and looked out at the lake, now emptying, quiet again. That's when Veronica stepped close and hissed through clenched teeth. "You just destroyed years of planning." "No," I said. "You destroyed it when you tried to steal what wasn't yours." Back at the cabin, Rachel and I toasted with iced tea as the drone footage uploaded to our cloud folder. "You think it's over?" I asked. She smirked. "Not even close." She pointed to her screen. An email from the county zoning office had just arrived. Subject: Notice of Project Withdrawal, Baywater Marina and Lodge. Attached was a copy of the HOA's retraction letter. "I think they're starting to get the message," Rachel said. But I wasn't done. Now, it was time to go on offense. By the time Monday rolled around, the tournament banners were gone. The docks were empty. The base boats had been hauled away in a rush, and not a single HOA board member dared to show their face on the eastern shore. But the battle was far from over. Because while the fishing club was licking its wounds, the HOA had quietly begun circling the wagons, and their next move would prove just how far they were willing to go to keep power. The first sign came via certified mail. I was in the middle of repainting the cabin shutters when Duke barked. A delivery truck pulled up the gravel drive, and the driver handed me a thick manila envelope with the Maple Bay Shores HOA logo stamped in the corner. I opened it on the porch. Inside was a formal violation notice, again, this time with new wording. "Dear Mr. Carver, it has come to our attention that structures and visual elements on your property may violate community design standards. Specifically, unauthorized coloration on window shutters, non-standard fencing along your property boundary, unapproved signage on lake-facing land, unauthorized dwelling modifications, boathouse repairs. Failure to remedy these infractions within 14 days will result in $1,000 in fines and referral to HOA counsel for enforcement." I let out a laugh that startled Duke. They were coming after my shutters? This wasn't just overreach, it was war by paperwork. Rachel called it retaliatory enforcement, and she was furious. "They're targeting you with fictitious violations," she said, reading the letter aloud. "You're not in their HOA zone. They're trying to bury you under fake rules to buy time and intimidate you into submission." She scanned the return address and added, "This came from their law firm, Halbridge and Cohen. Big guns. Expensive. Means they're scared. Should I ignore it?" "No." We respond. Not just with a letter, with a lawsuit. Within 72 hours, Rachel had filed a retaliation claim under state civil code, citing abuse of HOA enforcement powers, attempted false lien threats, and willful harassment. Attached were 37 pieces of evidence. The original HOA notice for the boat. Footage of the fishing tournament. A timeline of trespassing events. Side-by-side comparisons of alleged violations. A notarized affidavit from my surveyor, confirming we weren't part of the HOA zone at all. But the real kicker? Rachel dug up a document from 1995, buried in the county clerk's archives, confirming that Carver Basin was explicitly excluded from all Maple Bay zoning overlays due to its original homestead status. They had no claim. Not even close. Still, we knew they wouldn't back down without one more dirty move. We just didn't expect how far they'd go. A few days later, I walked out to the dock and noticed something strange. My private property signs were gone. Not just one or two, all of them. Every stake. Every warning. Pulled clean from the soil. And in their place? New signs. Glossy. Professionally printed. Welcome to Baywater Commons. HOA regulation area begins here. Unauthorized use of HOA-controlled shoreline is subject to fines and towing at owner's expense. I stood frozen, rage creeping up my spine. They had crossed a line, literally. They weren't just bluffing now. They were actively rebranding my land as theirs. Rachel drove out that afternoon, fuming. She took photos of the signs and called the county clerk's office directly. And then she said two words that lit the fuse. Forgery suspected. It turns out the HOA had filed an amendment to their boundary map with the zoning board, just 6 days earlier, attempting to redraw their regulatory zone to include part of Carver Basin's shoreline. Their justification? Historical use and community engagement patterns justify inclusion under regulatory overview. Rachel's jaw dropped. They're trying to retroactively claim land based on the fact that they used it illegally. This isn't just bold, it's criminal. She marched straight to the county courthouse, filed a motion for fraudulent boundary expansion, and requested an immediate cease and desist on all physical signage pending review. Within 24 hours, a sheriff's deputy, a new one, not the one who brushed me off last time, came to the cabin and took an official statement. This time, he was all business. We've been getting multiple complaints about the HOA overstepping. You're not the only one, he said. And that forged boundary? That's serious. County Legal is opening a full investigation. The storm was here. And now, the public was about to find out. Remember Sarah Landon? The reporter Rachel had reached out to weeks earlier? She called me the next day. I've got the green light, she said. This is front-page material. She'd been quietly investigating Maple Bay shores, interviewing frustrated residents who had been hit with unexplained fees, false violations, and mysterious improvements that were never approved by vote. And once she confirmed the forged zoning document, she was ready to publish. I've seen HOAs overreach before, she said, but trying to steal a lake with signage and redrawn maps? That's next-level madness. Her article dropped 2 days later. Headline: Local HOA accused of fraud and attempted lake takeover, resident fights back with legal bombshell. The story included images of the fishing tournament, side-by-side maps showing the forgery, a breakdown of the retaliation campaign, quotes from Rachel, the surveyor, and me. And then came the community reaction. My phone blew up. Neighbors I'd never met called and emailed. Some thanked me. Some were angry, not at me, but at the HOA for lying to them. One older couple, Sandra and Glenn Hughes, came by the next afternoon with fresh banana bread and tears in their eyes. We've lived here 12 years, Sandra said. Paid our dues. Got fined for a wreath once. But we never knew they were stealing. If you need help with anything, we're here. And then came the wave. Over the next 48 hours, dozens of Maple Bay Shores residents demanded a special board meeting. HOA bylaws allowed it if at least 25% of residents signed a petition. They got double that number in 24 hours. The meeting was set for Friday night in the Maple Bay Shores Community Center. Rachel and I attended, not as participants, but as witnesses. By the time we arrived, the parking lot was full. Folding chairs were being brought in. People were standing along the walls, holding copies of Sarah's article and HOA fee statements in their hands like weapons. Veronica Hale entered with a security escort. Gerald Frank stayed in the back, arms folded, eyes narrowed. The tension was electric. The residents didn't wait for introductions. What happened to the $12,000 we raised for shoreline beautification? Why did we spend HOA money on tournament trophies? Is it true the lake was never ours? Who approved the resort development plans? Veronica tried to deflect, but every answer dug her hole deeper. And then Rachel stepped up. Mr. Carver has agreed to let me speak on his behalf, she said calmly. She held up the deed again. This lake was never yours. Not in part. Not in whole. And every attempt made by this board to claim ownership was not only false, it was legally actionable. She paused. We are currently pursuing civil damages for 5 years of unauthorized use, and will cooperate fully with any criminal investigations that follow." The room erupted in murmurs. One resident shouted, "We want new leadership." Another yelled, "You lied to us." And just like that, the board began to crumble. 3 of the 5 board members resigned on the spot. Veronica refused. Said it was all a misunderstanding. Said she had no idea the documents were fraudulent. Rachel leaned over and whispered to me, "She'll be gone in a week." I believed her. Because after that night, we didn't just have the law on our side. We had the people. Back at the cabin that evening, I looked out over Carver Basin, now quiet, peaceful, and finally, mine again. But the war wasn't over. Not until every trace of the HOA's fraud was dismantled. And I already knew what my next move would be. By the following week, Maple Bay Shores wasn't just buzzing, it was boiling. Veronica Hale had gone radio silent. The HOA's hotline played a looped message about temporary administrative delays. And the community newsletter, once filled with passive-aggressive lawn tips and approved mailbox colors, had mysteriously skipped its latest issue. But I wasn't resting. Because while the HOA scrambled to hold their fake empire together, I was working with Rachel on a surgical takedown, not just of the board's lies, but of their entire house of cards. It started with the finances. Rachel and I had already filed our civil suit for damages, but we weren't just after some payout. We wanted accountability. So Rachel submitted a legal discovery request to the HOA's treasurer demanding full financial records for the past 7 years. Receipts for all expenditures related to the fishing club, events, and development lobbying. A ledger of all lake-related maintenance fees collected from residents. Contracts or payments made to external vendors, including one listed as Shoreline Consulting Group. We knew what we were looking for. Rachel had traced Shoreline Consulting Group to a P.O. box in Florida. No website. No public office. But the business license? Registered to a man named Gerald Franks. Yes, the same Gerald who ran the fishing club. The same man who had been directing tournaments on my lake. The same man who had been collecting thousands in HOA funds, through a shell company he owned. "This is going to explode," Rachel said, staring at the paperwork. "We're not just talking about trespassing now. We're talking about embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of community funds." She was right. And to make sure this explosion happened publicly, we decided it was time to re-engage Sarah Landon, the reporter. Sarah met us at the cabin later that week. She brought a cameraman. "I've got an interview scheduled with the county prosecutor next week," she said. "If this is as bad as it looks, they're going to need more than your lawsuit. They'll want a full-blown investigation." We handed her everything. Scans. Spreadsheets. Trail camera footage showing HOA workers placing the fake boundary signs. Receipts from the so-called shoreline vendor, all signed by Gerald. And the final cherry on top? A hidden mic recording I captured during a brief friendly conversation with Gerald 3 days ago. He'd pulled up in his Ford Explorer, stepping out like a man who thought the storm had passed. He had that same old grin, like nothing had happened. "I think we all got off on the wrong foot," he said. "Maybe we work out a settlement. You drop your lawsuit, we help with some upgrades to your property. Hell, maybe even get you honorary club membership." I smiled and said nothing. But my phone, tucked into my chest pocket, was recording every word. "Look," Gerald continued, voice dropping. "You know how this works. Sometimes paperwork gets stretched. But it was all for the community. Nobody got hurt. That was all I needed." Rachel sent the audio file to Sarah the moment I walked back into the cabin. And when Sarah heard the phrase "paperwork gets stretched" spoken by the HOA's fishing club president, she smiled the way a shark smiles when it smells blood. "This," she said, "is about to get national." By the end of the week, it did. Her second article dropped on a Thursday morning, but this one wasn't just in the local paper. The Charlotte Observer picked it up. Then WNCN TV. Then a national HOA watchdog blog. Headline: North Carolina HOA accused of stealing lake, funneling funds to fake company run by fishing club president. It spread like wildfire. Within hours, the Maple Bay Shores Facebook group was in flames. Angry residents shared screenshots, demanded refunds, and started publicly demanding resignations. Someone even created a meme of Gerald's face photoshopped onto a fish being reeled in with the caption, "Got caught on his own line." That Friday, the county prosecutor launched a formal investigation. Gerald was served with a subpoena. The HOA treasurer resigned. 2 more board members vanished without comment. And then came the knock on my door. It was Deputy Carson, the same officer who had shrugged me off during my original boat theft report. But this time, his demeanor was very different. "Mr. Carver," he said, holding up a small case file. "We're reopening your original complaint. We believe your boat was illegally removed, and we're treating it as a criminal matter now." I raised an eyebrow. "Even though it's been returned?" He nodded. "Still counts. We've also got reason to believe there was collusion between HOA officers and a private towing contractor who didn't have jurisdiction." I let that sit a moment. Rachel walked in from the back deck. "We'll provide full cooperation," she said. "And we'll be filing supplemental evidence next week." Deputy Carson swallowed hard. "Appreciate it." The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was Veronica Hale. Her voice was flat, tired. Not the clipped, manicured tone I'd come to expect. "Mr. Carver," she said, "I'd like to meet." "Why?" "Because everything is unraveling," she admitted. "And if we don't talk soon, it's going to get worse for everyone, including you." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "I'll give you 20 minutes. You bring nothing. You come alone." And I hung up. She arrived at 2:17 p.m. No SUV. No clipboard. Just her, in plain clothes, hair pulled back, hands shaking slightly. We sat at the picnic table under the birch tree by the lake. "I didn't know how deep it went," she said quietly. "I knew about the tournaments, sure, and maybe we got a little informal with the rules. But Gerald? The money? The forged map? I didn't know. I didn't say anything." She looked at the lake. "I thought it was ours. The board always said." "Did you ever check?" I asked. "Ever verify the deed? Ask questions?" "No," she said. "I trusted them." I leaned back. "That's the problem. You trusted a system that was never meant to be questioned." She looked at me. "What do you want, Mr. Carver?" Rachel stepped out from the cabin then, walking over slowly. "I think," she said calmly, "what Mr. Carver wants is for all of this to be rebuilt the right way. Not just the lake. The community. The people who live here." Veronica looked down. "You mean, dissolve the board?" "No," I said. "I mean replace it." She looked up, eyes wide. "You?" I shook my head. "Not me. I've got a lake to take care of. But there are good people here, honest ones. And they deserve leadership that doesn't lie to them." Veronica sat there for a long time. Then finally, she said the words, "I'll resign." Later that night, I received a text from Sandra Hughes. "Veronica's gone. Residents holding a vote next week. You've got the community behind you, Ben. We owe you." I stared at the phone for a while. Duke nudged my leg. The lake was still. Quiet. No tournament. No banners. Just water and wind and pine needles. It finally felt like home. The resignation hit like a thunderclap. Within 24 hours of Veronica Hale stepping down, the Maple Bay Shores HOA board entered what could only be described as meltdown mode. Residents flooded the community message board with questions, angry emails, and suggestions for how to take back the neighborhood. But I wasn't celebrating just yet. Because we weren't just rebuilding from broken policies and petty fines. We were digging through the ashes of a fraud empire that had quietly siphoned off tens of thousands of dollars, all under the guise of community improvement. The new interim board was led by a retired school principal named Harold Dean, who had lived in Maple Bay for 22 years and had long been suspicious of the secretive spending. A few days after being voted in by a majority of residents, he reached out to me directly. "Ben," he said over the phone, "we need help. No one knows how deep the financial hole goes. The old treasurer's vanished. Gerald won't answer calls. And people are starting to ask where their dues have been going for the last 5 years." "I have receipts," I said. Literally. Rachel and I met with Harold and 3 newly elected board members in the community center, this time, without guards, without speeches, and without cheap wine. We laid everything out on the table. A complete timeline of tournament events held on Carver Basin. Records of shoreline management fees paid to Gerald Shell Company. Internal emails between former board members suggesting they knew the lake wasn't legally theirs. Screenshots of investor proposals that misrepresented lake ownership. Harold sat there quietly for a long time, arms crossed, jaw clenched. "Jesus," he finally muttered. "It's worse than I thought. I don't want revenge," I told him. "But the truth needs to be public. And people need to know what happened." Harold nodded. "Then we'll tell them." The following weekend, the new board hosted a town hall meeting on the community green, open air, no closed doors, no hidden agendas. Over 100 residents showed up. Harold stepped to the mic with calm authority and began reading from a prepared statement. After a full review of HOA financials and correspondence, the board has confirmed that past leadership knowingly misrepresented ownership of Carver Basin and misused HOA funds to support unauthorized activities on Mr. Carver's private property. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Some residents stood, fists clenched. Others shook their heads in disbelief. We have also learned that former members, including Gerald Franks, directed money to a privately owned shell company that received payment for shoreline consulting, services never authorized by resident vote and never documented with receipts. There was shouting now. Harold held up a hand. "We will be pursuing full legal recovery of those funds, cooperating with the county prosecutor, and issuing HOA dues refunds proportionally as soon as financial restructuring allows." He paused. "And most importantly, we are apologizing to Mr. Ben Carver, not as an HOA, but as neighbors." People clapped. For the first time, the sound was genuine. I stepped up briefly. I didn't want to gloat. I wanted people to understand this wasn't just about me or a lake. It was about what happens when power goes unchecked. "I don't want a fence around the water," I told them. "I want a future where everyone respects the boundaries that matter, legal, moral, and personal." Afterward, dozens of residents came up to shake my hand. One of them was a teenage boy named Derek who lived in the Birch Point condos. "My dad used to take me fishing on your lake," he said. "We didn't know it wasn't public. We're sorry." I smiled. "Tell your dad to bring you back. Just knock on the cabin door first." But just when we thought things were beginning to settle, the final storm hit. It came from Gerald himself. Late one Thursday night, Rachel forwarded me a video from her inbox. The sender? A former HOA accountant who had gone quiet during the scandal. The video? Surveillance footage from the community office, timestamped from 2 weeks earlier. It showed Gerald, alone, entering the office at 2:18 a.m., using a master key, and carrying a black duffel bag. For 26 minutes, he moved through cabinets, drawers, and filing boxes. At one point, he pulled out a folder marked Development Proposal, East Valley Holdings, and slipped it into his bag. At another, he opened a drawer full of paper HOA checks, and removed a stack 2 inches thick. Then, at exactly 2:45 a.m., he looked directly into the camera and flipped it off. The next morning, the office had been found unlocked, and several files were reported missing. We handed the footage over to Deputy Carson. By noon, the county prosecutor had issued a formal warrant for Gerald Frank's arrest on charges of grand larceny, destruction of evidence, obstruction of a county investigation, fraudulent acquisition of HOA funds. The sheriff's department raided Gerald's lakeside home that same afternoon. He wasn't there. His car was gone. His phone disconnected. But he'd left one thing behind, a whiteboard in his garage listing future Q3 investment targets, and next to it, a bullet point reading: Ben C. Buy out or push out. Rachel snapped a picture and shook her head. He never had a plan B. The news broke the next day. HOA Fishing Club president wanted for fraud, fleeing investigation. Sarah's report painted a picture of greed, manipulation, and entitlement, all centered around one man who thought he could rewrite property lines with charm and PowerPoint slides. By the weekend, social media had erupted. HOA watchdog forums praised the Carver Basin case as a blueprint for fighting back against corrupt HOAs. Rachel got interview requests from 3 law schools and 2 podcasts. I turned them down. I wasn't interested in going viral. I just wanted peace. And I was finally getting close. 3 weeks later, the county issued a public statement confirming that Carver Basin was legally protected private property, and that no HOA zoning or development plans would ever be recognized there. And with that declaration, I hung a new sign at the front of my drive. Welcome to Carver Basin, private land, shared respect. Because I wasn't bitter. I wasn't locking the gate. I was opening it, the right way. But Gerald wasn't done. Not yet. Because a week later, a certified envelope arrived. Inside was a single typed letter. You think this is over? You humiliated me. But power comes back around. Don't get too comfortable. G. No return address. Postmarked from Florida. Rachel reported it immediately. Deputies flagged it but said unless he returned to the state or committed a new offense, their hands were tied. I didn't say a word. I just bought a second trail camera. And I slept with the porch light on. Because Gerald might have been gone. But this story wasn't finished yet. For a while, life at Carver Basin finally felt normal again. Neighbors waved. Fishermen asked for permission. Duke chased dragonflies off the dock, and Rachel even convinced me to host a small neighborhood cookout, a sort of peace offering. But the peace didn't last. Because snakes always slither back when the grass gets too quiet. And Gerald Franks wasn't done with me. Not by a long shot. It started with a drone. At first, I thought it was one of mine. I had 2 on a flight loop to monitor the shoreline for any trespassers or survey markers. But this one moved differently. It buzzed lower. Bolder. Hung just above the boathouse. Then zipped toward the cabin window before vanishing over the treeline. I checked the footage from my cameras. It wasn't one of mine. Rachel reviewed it too. That's a Black Falcon 6X. Commercial grade. Not something your average retiree picks up at Walmart. She ran the footage through an image analysis tool. Frame by frame, we caught a glimpse of something odd on the bottom of the drone. A decal. Faded. Almost invisible. It was a bass fish holding a hook in its mouth. The same emblem Gerald used on all the Baywater Fishing Club trophies. Later that evening, Duke started growling at the woods behind the cabin. He never did that. Not unless something, or someone, was there. I grabbed the flashlight and walked the perimeter. Didn't see anything at first. But near the base of the path that curved behind the dock, I found something buried shallow under leaves. A trail cam. One that wasn't mine. Someone had zip-tied it to a tree trunk and aimed it at my back porch, hidden so precisely you wouldn't spot it unless you were inches away. I called Rachel. Her voice turned ice cold. He's watching you. We went straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Carson pulled a pen from behind his ear and jotted down notes while I dropped the drone footage and photos of the hidden camera on his desk. Legally, he said, if he never stepped onto your property and didn't fly below the FAA altitude minimums, it's a gray zone. But the trail cam? That's trespassing. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Gray zone? He's a fugitive. Carson nodded slowly. Which is why this helps. Gives us probable cause to reopen our case file and check camera shops in state. He's likely using someone else's name to buy this equipment. Rachel leaned in. We need surveillance authorization. Not next week. Now. Carson picked up the phone. The next day, Rachel installed 3 new motion sensors and a facial recognition camera disguised in a fake birdhouse at the front gate. She also reached out to a contact she knew, a former cybersecurity student who worked in digital footprint tracing. Within hours, he had traced the drone's signal path back to a burner router connected through a mobile hotspot, pinged near an abandoned hunting cabin 2.3 miles west of Carver Basin. That hunting cabin used to belong to Gerald's uncle. It was still in the family. Rachel called the sheriff again. By Sunday morning, we were sitting in Deputy Carson's cruiser, parked just outside the dirt road leading to the cabin. At exactly 7:46 a.m., we saw the target. A dusty gray SUV rolled down the path. Tinted windows. Slow pace. As it passed the trail camera we'd planted near the turn, the software pinged us instantly. Facial match, Gerald Franks. 93% confidence. Carson picked up the radio. 2 marked units swept in from opposite ends of the access road. Within 15 minutes, Gerald was in handcuffs, red-faced, sweating, and caught in the same clothes he used to wear to fishing club meetings, only now they were covered in mud. You can't prove anything, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. You left your emblem on the drone, I said. And your fingerprints are on the trail cam you zip-tied to a birch tree. Real rookie mistake. He scowled. This is your fault. You ruined everything. I stepped forward, voice calm. No. You ruined it when you decided to turn a community into a kingdom and play king. He didn't respond. But the silence said it all. That evening, the sheriff's office released a statement to the public. Gerald Franks, former HOA affiliate and Baywater Fishing Club founder, has been taken into custody on charges related to trespassing, unlawful surveillance, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Additional charges are pending. The post went viral locally. So many Maple Bay residents shared it, someone created a hashtag. Hashtag Lake Justice. And while I didn't care about hashtags, I did care about closure. A week later, Gerald was denied bail due to flight risk. His personal accounts were frozen. The new HOA board voted unanimously to dissolve all remaining fishing club assets and redirect leftover funds to a community restoration project, one that would build a shared-use dock, a picnic area, and a permanent sign that read, Carver Basin, privately owned, community trusted. And here's the twist. They asked me to design it. One quiet night, as Rachel and I sat on the dock with Duke asleep between us, she turned to me. You could have walked away from this, you know. Could have just kicked everyone off the lake and built a wall. I thought about it, I admitted. But then I realized, walls don't keep people out. They just block the ones who care from getting in. She smiled. I hope this place becomes a model for how people fight back and still stay human doing it. I nodded. Because that's what Carver Basin had become. Not just a lake, but a lesson. And yet, just when I thought the story had ended, I got a letter. No return address. No signature. But I recognized the slanted handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. I wasn't the only one watching. Attached was a photograph of me on the dock. Taken from across the lake. Dated, 2 days after Gerald's arrest. I stared at the photo for a long time. And I knew. This story wasn't over. Not yet. The photo haunted me. There I was, sitting on my dock, coffee in hand, Duke at my feet, unaware that someone had been watching me from the shadows. The image was crisp, professional. The kind you take when you're not just creeping, but documenting. And the postmark? Georgia. Not Florida, where Gerald had fled. Not North Carolina, where he was now behind bars. Somewhere new. Rachel's face turned to stone the moment she saw it. Someone else was helping him, she said. He never had the tech chops to spoof routers, fly high-end drones, or cover his tracks this well. Someone was guiding him. Who? I asked. I don't know yet, she said. But I'm going to find out. While Rachel dug through phone records and court files, I returned to what grounded me, Carver Basin. But even peace felt different now, like standing in a house that had been robbed and never quite trusting the locks again. I reinforced the perimeter cameras. Changed the trail cam frequencies. Upgraded the door locks. Installed license plate recognition at the front gate. But the tension lingered, an invisible thread pulling tighter with every whisper in the trees. Until one evening, the thread snapped. It was a Wednesday. The sky was bruised with clouds. Duke was pacing near the screen door, ears alert. That's when a knock came, slow, deliberate, just 3 raps. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. A man stood at the edge of the driveway. Mid-40s, stocky, beard scruff, wearing a ranger-style jacket. He raised both hands slowly. "Mr. Carver," he said calmly. "My name's Clay Briggs. I was Gerald's consultant. I'm here to talk." That's it. I didn't move. "I don't want trouble," he added. "But there are things you should know. Things Gerald didn't tell you." That got my attention. Rachel was already watching from inside. I gave a subtle nod and stepped forward, just enough to show I wasn't scared, but I wasn't naive either. "Start talking," I said. Clay wasn't some low-level HOA crony. He had been the architect behind the entire fishing club expansion. He was a land-use strategist who'd worked with multiple HOAs to redefine boundaries through applied community pressure. In other words, a professional thief who used paperwork instead of bolt cutters. And he had been paid $60,000 by East Valley Holdings to quietly prepare Carver Basin for acquisition. His method? Create the illusion of ownership by use. Slowly blur the lines. Host events. Install signage. Get the people to believe it's shared property. Once perception shifts, legal challenges become harder to win. I felt my blood run cold. "You were conditioning them," I said. He nodded. "We've done it before. Small lakes. Forest easements. Even back lots in suburban neighborhoods. Most people don't fight back. But you." He paused. "You ruined the blueprint." Rachel stepped outside then. "You're confessing to coordinated fraud on private property," she said. "That's either brave or incredibly stupid." "I'm not here for absolution," Clay said. "I'm here because I'm out. Gerald burned too many bridges. East Valley dropped him. I got stiffed on my final payment. And now I'm watching the empire collapse." I narrowed my eyes. "Then why tell me any of this?" Clay looked up toward the cabin, then back at the lake. "Because there's another project. Bigger. Out west. And they were watching this one closely. If they think you're weak, that you only won because you had a good lawyer and got lucky, they'll keep coming. Different place. Different name. Same playbook." Rachel pulled out her phone. "You willing to testify?" Clay sighed. "I'll sign a statement. But no cameras. No interviews. I just want out before the walls come down on all of us." The next day, Rachel filed a federal complaint using Clay's signed affidavit, attaching it to our ongoing civil suit. It wasn't just about Carver Basin anymore. Now it was about systemic land theft disguised as HOA expansion. The case was handed to a regional land ethics task force, and within 2 weeks, subpoenas were issued to East Valley Holdings and several related shell companies across 3 states. Gerald's arrest had been the spark. Clay's confession. The explosion. As the dust settled, Rachel and I took a trip. Not far. Just 2 hours north. To a private lake community where rumors of a fishing access reassignment were floating around. We stood by the shore. The signs looked familiar. Community waters, shoreline use encouraged. Sounded innocent. But we both knew what it meant. Rachel looked at me. What now? I smiled. Now? We educate. 3 months later, we launched a new initiative. BasingUR.org, a nonprofit resource hub for rural and small-town landowners facing HOA overreach and false boundary claims. Within the first month, over 200 property owners submitted questions. 3 news outlets covered the launch. 2 lawyers from different states joined the advisory team. One of our first posts was titled, "The Lake They Couldn't Steal, How One Man Fought an HOA and Won." I still live at Carver Basin. Duke still chases dragonflies. The dock still creaks under my boots. But now, things feel different. Better. Because the silence here isn't just peaceful. It's earned. And if someone ever tries to take it again, they'll find out the hard way. You don't steal from the man who owns the lake.